Christine and Diane for inviting me to speak to you about what really is my favorite topic, competency-based education, as well as how PLA fits within that space of competency-based education. Let me just briefly tell you what the mission of the institute that I head is, so that you have a little sense of what we are doing over there at the Texas A&M University Commerce campus. We really have a kind of a threefold mission. The first part of our mission at this new institute is to support the continuing development and success of our current CBE program, which I'll be talking about a little bit more here, as well as to help support the development of additional CBE programs on that campus. Then, number two, I would say our mission is to support the development of CBE throughout the state of Texas. So we really do have a mission to assist you in any way that we can if you are interested in developing CBE programs at your home campuses. And then finally, we have a mission to conduct research on competency-based education, particularly helping to fill a big hole that's out there right now, which is research on outcomes for students who graduate from CBE programs. So we are beginning to really create a research agenda in that respect. One of the other things that we do I wanted to mention, as Kevin Fagan knows very well, we are heading up a CBE, a Texas CBE work group of any institution interested in CBE. Right now it's really a group where we're sharing resources and ideas and commiserating, and you can participate in any level you want. We were housed at the coordinating board where I worked before, and now we're in a bit of a transition phase as we kind of figure out what this group is going to be and do and what our mission is going to be. Kevin is on the leadership team for this group. If you're interested in joining and help us really shape the future of what this group is going to be, please don't hesitate to contact me. I'll have my email address at the end of this program, or feel free to come and grab a card, and anyone is welcome to join this group, so just let me know. But so that I can keep us on our time schedule here, let me move forward to, whoops, that would be backwards. There we go. To talk a little bit about just what is competency-based education, a little CBE 101, and then to talk about the relationship between CBE and PLA. So the primary points that I want to make here are, what are the key components and definitions of competency-based education? Not an easy thing to do, but talk about that a little bit. What are some of the challenges and opportunities related to CBE? Then I'd like to talk a little bit about our CBE program at Texas A&M University Commerce, the TAB program, the Texas Affordable Baccalaureate Degree. And then let's move into talking a little bit about PLA. Just a really quick overview of key components and definitions, and then let's spend the rest of the time talking about the relationship between CBE and PLA. This is going to be a very broad overview in the interest of time, but I hope it gives you a bit of an introduction regarding the relationship between these things. And I do want to say at the outset that I really applaud you for your interest in PLA and or CBE. It says a lot about you and your institution, because what this is all about is providing options to students and helping them maximize their often very scarce education dollars. So, you know, way to go being here. And if you've attended any of our other events, I just really applaud you for that. I hope you find it a worthwhile use of your time. I think we probably all know that defining CBE is fraught. There's all kinds of definitions out there, and I myself, I have a hard time just saying a definition in a nutshell. I was doing some filming for Amar Deep yesterday, and she asked me to define CBE, and I refused. But I'm going to go ahead and do it here, and we actually at the Institute have, in conjunction with the coordinating board, because we all know that, especially if you're developing policy, you've got to have some definitions. But let me just talk about what I think are the three basic key components to competency-based education. Competencies. It's in the title, it's in the definition. Competencies, the skills and knowledge that any student must have in order to demonstrate mastery. Skills and knowledge a student must have in order to demonstrate mastery, those competencies. This, especially when we talk about the difference between PLA and CBE, is a crucial component of CBE. CBE, by definition, is education. It includes instruction and learning. It includes curricula. I'll come back to that point because it's really an important one. And then the next point, which is really where the primary overlap with PLA is that you have assessments. Carefully designed assessments, high quality assessments are key to a high quality CBE program. You cannot have a high quality CBE program without high quality assessments. That's the same case with PLA. I would say. So that's really the area that you have a lot of overlap there, and I'll come back to that. For competency-based education, you basically could say that in CBE, learning is fixed and time is variable. Learning is fixed and time is, that's opposed to the traditional higher ed that we've been engaging in for over 100 years now, thanks largely to the fact that we are completely constructed around the semester credit hour. Traditional, time is fixed, a semester basically, or a quarter. And unfortunately, the reality is that often learning is variable. I was a faculty member for many years. I like to think that all my students learned a high amount, but the fact is in any given class, you've got a group of students who have really mastered the majority of the material, but then you've got students who pass with the D or the C or a D, and that means they probably haven't mastered a lot of the material. That's a problem. With competency-based education, you're trying to minimize that so that any student who passes a competency, a course, if you're mapping back to courses, a degree, if they graduate from a degree program, has had to master at a level that's decided by your program. Our program, it's 80% mastery. Therefore, they truly are competent in those learning outcomes that you set or the material that you have set forward for them. About, I would say, 8 months ago, when I was still at the coordinating board, we began working to create a definition of competency-based education for policy purposes. Then whenever I accepted the position at the Institute, we continued to work together, hone and refine this definition. This is on the website of the Institute. We have a policy brief that we have written, and it lives there. I'm trying to kind of figure out how to publicize that policy brief, but I'll put the URL of that of our Institute up at the end of the presentation if you would like to read the policy brief, which really explains how and why we came up with this. Competency-based education allows students to progress towards completion, often at their own pace. Often these are self-paced, not always, as they demonstrate mastery, measured through authentic assessment of a defined set of knowledge and skills, those competencies. Programs may be organized around traditional course-based units, or they may be direct assessment, but this is not required. A majority of the curriculum must include regular and substantive faculty-initiated interaction. This is a controversial point. I'll come back to it in a minute. But the coordinating board and the Institute believes a crucial one, at least now. I wanted to put up here this definition by the Council for Adult and Experiential Education as well. I think, frankly, they do a little better job, I think, of making a little more concise definition. They say that it's instruction, they like that word too, customized to take students from where they are to where they want to go, to help them demonstrate competency along the way. I like that definition as well. So what are some opportunities, like this fish who likes that fishbowl better and decides to jump into it with competency-based education? These qualities are not inherent in every program, but they do often offer the student the opportunity to engage in self-paced learning. Therefore, the student can either accelerate faster than they might in a traditional program, or, and a lot of people forget this, that for some students, a big advantage is being able to slow down, to say, I don't understand these concepts, I need more time with them. And you can do that more in a self-paced program. We have a graduate, and he likes to tell a story about the fact that he was in the military for many years, and he was a statistician in the military. He passed our statistics class, he took it, he entered it, and completed it in 36 hours. That's a 3-hour course. Hi, Mary, you know. However, the art appreciation course that he was taking for his general education coursework, it took him quite a bit longer. And he was glad. He probably would not have been able to pass that if he hadn't been able to slow down and take a little bit more time. Personalized learning, and these really go hand in hand, I would say, but the ability to, as I said, slow down with information, accelerate if you want, do PLA if you want, not do it. There's just a lot of ways that you can personalize learning within competency-based education. Flexibility, especially the kind of flexibility that you have in any online program, I would say, that if you're a working adult, you can work on your coursework at night, on the weekends, what have you. There's a variety of ways that it's flexible. Acceleration, I've already been talking about that, the ability to complete the degree quicker than you might be able to in a traditional program. And for many students, hopefully, affordability. And of course, the big controversy right now is whether or not, how affordable is this for the institution? This can take significant amounts of resources up front. But ultimately, I think the goal of a lot of CBE programs is to make education, higher education, more affordable for the student. Some challenges inherent? Well, these are, I would say, largely inherent in kind of the regulatory environment that exists for higher education. This would include things like accreditation. I think probably most of us are familiar with a lot of the requirements that SACS has to accredit our programs, and that really kind of gets ramped up, I think, with CBE in terms of things like satisfactory academic progress, regular and substantive faculty interaction, and how you're setting up your terms, if you're doing non-standard terms, standard terms. So there's a variety of issues related to accreditation you may have to deal with. With our program, with the TAB program, we initially had been assured that it was not a substantive change. This was a program we already offered online on the campus, therefore it would not be substantive. At a bit of a last hour, we were told that it did require a substantive change. It all worked out, we got the program approved, but as Dr. Hendricks there in the back knows, that was a lot of stressful time. Then there's a lot of issues related to financial aid. I've already kind of, this can be related somewhat, but student satisfactory academic progress. If you do non-standard terms, when are you, when are you dishing out the financial aid? When are you giving it to the students? The Competency-Based Education Network, CBEN, if you haven't heard of them, they just the other day released a document that you could give to your financial aid people that outlines a lot of these challenges and ways that you can deal with them. So if you want information about CBEN, let me know. It's a really great document to negotiate very tricky waters of financial aid for students. But of course you want to negotiate it because you want to be sure that students have in your programs, or a lot of you will want to ensure that students are able to access financial aid. I know some programs, though, that have given up, that say we're going to look for other ways to give students, fellowships or grant money or what have you. We're just not even going to deal with this. But that's a shame if you have to do that. Funding, particularly state funding with the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. How are you going to get the state dollars whenever the census date is based on the 10th day of the semester? It's all based on semesters, and you might be doing non-standard terms. How are you going to get the dollars from them? I don't have easy answers for that, but rest assured that they are really working very hard, actually based on a lot of data that we are giving them at Texas A&M Commerce, to try to ensure that institutions are getting the kind of funding that they should be getting for programs that, again, can be very expensive up front and might not get in the black for quite a while. I do believe that the latest is that, then Mary, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but the latest is that the coordinating board is talking about a small additional amount that institutions would get that are implementing CBE on top of the regular formula that could cover some of that initial funding, or that initial cost and expense. Is that correct? That's the latest that I had heard. And I think, another challenge is that we have got to be doing research and getting data on outcomes for these programs. Otherwise, we're not going to get very much further with them. So we've got to find out, are students doing as well, if not better, with job placement, with getting better positions within the company that they're in? Are they indeed graduating faster if they want to? What are the outcomes here? And the Institute is very engaged in ensuring that we're really starting to collect this data, and is eager to work with institutions to collect this data so that we can be studying outcomes. The other thing that I want to say about this, there's so much more that I could say if I had the whole day about these regulatory requirements. Coming from a perspective of someone who worked at the coordinating board, I do think it's important to understand that what they are trying to do, the Department of Education, SACS, the coordinating board, is to balance the desire to uphold quality in higher education for our students and our institutions, but also to not hold back innovation. So it's a very difficult balance. Have a little empathy, I think, for what they're trying to do. Bureaucracy can really, I was just talking with Christine about this, bureaucracy can really get in the way sometimes. But I do think that they're walking a very kind of fine line between the two. I think that the Department of Ed, the coordinating board, SACS, they're all eager to support the kind of innovations that we want to do for student success. I think that they are. And there are really good people in all of those entities that are there to help you. So I would say take advantage of that. Just a little bit of information about the Texas Affordable Baccalaureate Program, some quick facts and data. I won't go into the development of this program. If you're interested in reading more about how it came about, then I would direct you to the CALE case study that was done on this program and its collaborative development between Texas A&M University Commerce, my institution, South Texas College, and the coordinating board. It's a really good read about how this was developed. But let me give you just a little bit of, in a nutshell, information about what this Bachelor of Applied Arts and Sciences in Organizational Leadership is about. We do have non-standard terms. We have 7-week terms, and within that term, a student pays $750 in tuition and fees inclusive. They can take as many courses, competencies, which then are mapped to courses, as they can complete. Now, our academic success coach gets them into 2 courses initially, and they must complete those 2 before they can move on to others within that term. But it is kind of an all-you-can-eat menu. If they are able to complete, they can move on, they can complete more. If all they can do are those 2, then that's perfectly fine. Then in the next term, they can complete some more. This is delivered completely online at Texas A&M University Commerce. At South Texas College, it's a hybrid model, where in the upper division, they actually have face-to-face meetings, as well as some online curriculum. As I'd mentioned, students are supported by both instructors and academic success coaches. We have had a 3,000% enrollment growth since the inception of this program. 3,000% growth. We've got a ways to go before we can scale up to the point level we would be at, that we said we would be at 5 years from when this started in January of 2014. But there has been a great deal of interest and very, very exciting growth. And then just a little bit about the curriculum. There are 99 competencies total mapped to 120 semester credit hours. We, as many institutions are doing, map back to the semester credit hour because it just makes a lot of things easier. Students can transfer then if they want to. They can go to grad school and have a transcript that looks familiar to that institution. We can get formula funding easier that way, financial aid. It's just easier. Now, I personally, between you and me, I personally am a believer that we have got to do away with the semester credit hour eventually. I just think, Christine and I were talking about this, I think it's just going to inhibit the kind of true innovation that we want to do in higher ed. It's an outdated model, but it's not going away anytime soon. And as long as the Department of Ed is still using it, SACS, Coordinating Board, for a measure of learning, a measure of how to pay your faculty, how to gauge faculty time, it really does make it easier to map back. However, if you're interested in experimenting with what's kind of the opposite, which is direct assessment, then you can apply to the Department of Education and become an experimental site to experiment with not mapping back to semester credit hours if you want to. My data guy, Carlos Rivers, and he's not in the room at the moment. I think he's supposed to be here today, so I'd love to introduce you if I can. He has put together some really incredible data snapshots for us. The average age of our students currently is 37. You can see a little bit about the ethnicities there, that we've got 63% white, but a significant minority population in the program as well. And gender, 45% male, 55% female. And then he's doing a really good job of tracking kind of time and money efficiencies, I would say, in our program. We started out with 7 students back in January of 2014. We've now got 235. We've graduated 54 students from the program. And those students have transferred into the program an average of 87 semester credit hours. So these are the very definition of stop-outs, of non-completers, of students who have amassed a huge amount of semester credit hours with no degree to show for it. It's really why I am so passionate about competency-based education. If you have doubters, skeptics at your institutions, tell them that you are meeting the needs of a population of students that really historically have had little place to turn for effective, efficient, affordable ways to complete those degrees. It makes me incredibly excited. Oh, come on in, Carlos. Come on in. This is a perfect time to put him on the spot. And this is Carlos Rivers. given that I'm presenting your data, I'm probably not doing it nearly as well as you could, but thank you for this. So glad to see you. Average semester hours completed at A&M Commerce to the degree, 46 SCH. Average number of 7-week terms to the degree once they enter the program at Texas A&M Commerce, 6 of these 7-week terms, so 42 weeks. Average cost to degree of our graduates once they get to Texas A&M, less than $4,500. That's really, in the grand scheme of things, not a lot to finally have that diploma that you've been wanting for a variety of reasons. And then cost to degree savings we have calculated is $6,650. That's probably, they would have had to have spent that in addition to the less than $4,500 to complete that degree. Pretty compelling data. And thank you, Carlos. He's just really doing a fantastic job, and he's a great resource for you, because I would suggest, and this was not really done. Now, you know, we, as Dr. Hendricks likes to say, we were on the bleeding edge of innovation. And you know, back whenever that I was in on the development of the program, you know, we really couldn't see far enough ahead to be thinking about what data did we need to be collecting. There were just too many other things just to get the program up and running. You now can benefit from those of us who have been in these trenches, and there's a number of you here who have been, who can help you figure out from the get-go, what do I need to be thinking in order to be able to track the success and effectiveness of this program. And Carlos can be a great resource in that respect, as well as others in this room. Okay, let me then move in about the, let's say, what time do you, we got about, oh, I do. Okay. Oh, good. I'm doing perfectly fine then, because I want to be sure I have time for Q&A. Let me move to talk a little bit about PLA then, the other subject of our day conference today. How many of you have attended any of these PLA Portal Project events? Could you raise your hand? We've got a few of you then. Okay. I'm assuming that you have some familiarity with PLA, whether or not you have attended those events. I'm going to talk a little bit about what Steve Taylor, one of the speakers at the February 4th event, talked about. But I won't go into a whole lot of detail about exactly, you know, just the nuts and bolts of what it is. But just a quick overview. As the name suggests, you've got to have assessments. Again, carefully designed assessments, either by your institution or by external entities like ACE, Excelsior, what have you. I'll talk a little more about those in a bit. And then you've got to have assessors. These are really the two basic components of PLA, although it's much more complicated than that, than I'm making it sound. But you really have to identify really good people who can do the assessing of those carefully designed assessments. And many would argue that, you know, what you really need to have are subject matter experts. I'll come back to that in a minute. I like as a good, in a nutshell, definition of PLA, assessment of learning acquired outside the institution. And now, that can be a variety of things, and I'll give a little taste of what some of those are. But in a nutshell, I would say assessment of learning acquired outside your institution. And the fact of the matter is that particularly if we're talking about post-traditional students, who are now the majority of students on many campuses, they have a lot of learning that they have acquired outside the institution. Why not give them credit for that? Why not recognize that? Council for Adult and Experiential Learning uses this definition. It's a term used for various institutional strategies, and there can be many of them, for evaluating the college-level learning that a student has acquired. And college-level learning is crucial, isn't it? That's crucial. It's got to be college level, that they have acquired outside of a formal college course for college credit. I have provided for you, or they have provided in your packets, I have given Diane and Christine and Tricia, this document by Kale. They call it the PLA and CBE on the competency continuum. And I'll go over a little bit of information that's in this in my presentation, but you can read in more detail about this. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and be honest with you and say I don't agree 100% with everything in this document. I never have qualms about giving information to an audience and saying, I don't agree with everything in it. There's some controversial concepts, particularly related to their continuum. I think kind of what they've got on the two opposite ends of the continuum, or to me, a little bit can be inaccurate in a number of settings. The way they frame direct assessment, for instance, I think is perhaps not entirely accurate, but that's just me. I'm a member of CALE. I work with them closely, so they do fantastic work. So I do think it's definitely worth a read, and taking back to your campuses, it's a great resource. But with anything, you want to read it with a careful, critical eye. I think they have a very good definition. Just some other things to think of is that remember that the credit is not given for the experience. You're not saying, oh, you've got 10 years of experience in accounting, let me give you 6 semester credit hours. They need to demonstrate that the learning that they have gained through those 10 years of accounting, it's probably pretty significant, but it's about the learning they've acquired, not just about the time, not just about that seat time again, be it at work or somewhere else. So think about that, that learning defined as demonstrated skills and knowledge, not just experience. You're going to probably, or you already have at your campuses, if you're thinking about engaging in PLA, you have to think about what fees are you going to charge the student to do this. Always keep in mind that the fees are not for the credit, it's for the assessment. You're not saying, I'm going to charge you $50 for that 1 semester credit hour. It's for the engaging in the assessment, which can be quite resource consuming. But you really want to be thinking in terms of that. Otherwise, you're getting in that mindset of your students are simply paying to get a credit. And that gets into dangerous territory of like a mail order degree or something that is not indicative of the quality of a student's learning. So think about fees for the assessment process. It's not a fee for the credit they're getting. Here is, to me, the crux of what the difference is between CBE and PLA. CBE very often incorporates PLA. However, PLA does not involve instruction. CBE is education. It's a curricula of instruction. Competency-based learning is learning a student engages in. PLA is about assessing learning that's already happened. CBE, it's got to have curricula, instruction, learning. I really am impressing that, because what I'm seeing around the state right now, particularly related to graduate education, is a lot of people saying, we're doing CBE, and I look at it and I go, no, that's PLA. You're simply assessing knowledge that the student has brought to your program, knowledge they gained prior to that program. The big sticky wicket right now, I'm going to be really honest about this and blunt, is that the coordinating board, the commissioner, is asking for those who are proposing new graduate programs, which I assume probably not many of you in here would be doing, but just so you know, that they need to have a CBE component to the program. The problem is that the programs are proposing what I would call PLA, and I think the coordinating board is saying okay. But when it comes to getting funding dollars from the state, do you really want to be funding institutions for PLA, or do you want to fund them for instruction? Those are two different things. So we can talk about that more if you want to, but I really have to emphasize that CBE is about instruction, PLA is about assessment of prior learning. Except, and I like to put this caveat in, sometimes PLA, because of one strategy for PLA is portfolio assessment, might involve instruction in building that portfolio. So you might say that in order to do this, we've got to have a course in creating an effective portfolio. So that will be instruction, but that's an exception to the rule, I would say. And I already mentioned this, but CALE particularly emphasizes this, and I will too, that it's important, I think, that assessment be done by subject matter experts, whether that's full-time faculty, adjuncts, staff, what have you, but they need to be subject matter experts in that subject you are assessing, I think. I think that's very important. At the last, not the one in Houston, but the one that was at Texas A&M University Commerce, the PLA Day on February 4th, Steve Taylor from the American Council on Education, is on or for American Council on Education, I think. I always forget the for or on. He presented this from CALE. So this does come from CALE, and he presented, these are just some of the types of PLA in which institutions engage. AP exam credit, CLEP exams, these are forms of PLA. Institutional challenge exams that the institution has created themselves. to challenge students and find out what learning they have. American Council for Education does military credit recommendations. They look at the learning that someone has acquired through the military. This is the primary type of PLA in which we engage at Texas A&M University Commerce because we have significant numbers of military students. And then portfolio assessments as well. So there's other types, other strategies, but these are some of the big ones. And then finally, this is a chart that I came up with. This was actually back when I was working at the coordinating board when I was having so many people ask me, I don't understand the difference between the two. So in order to be able to communicate it myself, I came up with this chart. And you have this PowerPoint available to you on our on the PLA portal website if you want to use this. Just take a moment to look at this. So CBE and PLA both include summative assessments. Summative assessments of learning. So PLA often can be a part of CBE in that respect. But PLA doesn't include formative assessments. Formative assessments are assessment tools in which a student can learn, in which you're assessing their learning and the progress of their learning. You don't have that in PLA. They're formative. CBE, they're summative, sorry. In CBE, you very likely are going to have formative assessments. PLA, you have awarding of credit pre-course. Before a student enters a course, a degree program, a competency, you award some credit based on those assessments. CBE, awarding of academic credit post-course. Awarding of academic post-course and awarding of a credential. I don't know of any environment, educational environment, where you can get a credential 100% through PLA. I don't know anyone who can sit down, take some challenge exams, show a portfolio, what have you, and someone says, here's your certificate, here's your associate's degree, here's your bachelor's degree, I don't know anywhere, and if it's happening, I don't think it should be, that's just me. But with CBE, because it's an educational program, it's a curricula, a degree, or certificate or degree program, you can. And I've been saying the word curricula all along. CBE, you don't have that in PLA. You don't have a well-developed curricula of instruction and learning in PLA. You have well-developed assessments, but not curricula, not instruction and learning. CBE, you have competencies and learning outcomes. Now, the one caveat I will say to that is that with PLA, you may have identified learning outcomes and you map that prior learning to those learning outcomes. You may have that. But those learning outcomes should be a part of a larger curriculum that might be CBE, it might be more traditional online education. I love how we're now saying traditional online education, don't you? Whenever I started teaching back in '97, I never would have envisioned that, but now we have other models that I think can allow us to call it traditional online education. CBE, you'll have things like personalized and adaptive learning. Again, with PLA, it's about prior learning. It's not about the student engaging in learning at the time. And with CBE, if you want to be accredited, you want for the Department of Education to be okay with you, you want students to be able to get financial aid, you had better have interaction between faculty and students. And it needs to be substantive and it needs to be regular. And one other point I'll say about that, by the way, because as a former faculty member perhaps, I'm a big proponent of let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater. I think faculty have a lot of concerns about this mode of education, often born by misconceptions that it will do away with their jobs, do away with the need for faculty member as subject matter experts. But we still need them, and it's important to have them in this equation. And regular and substantive interaction between faculty and students means that there is interaction going on, not just about issues a student may be having in their life, general advising, what have you, because competency-based education often disaggregates the staffing model, right? You might have subject matter experts, but you might also have academic coaches, you might also have tutors, you might have a variety of people, but you had better make sure that in a given competency or course that you have a subject matter expert who is regularly engaging on course content with the student. That's key. It needs to be about course content, not about the student's life. Those are important things, but in order to comply with this regulation, it needs to be about course content, it needs to be regular and substantive. There's a variety of ways you can go about that. No longer does that mean standing in front of a class like I'm doing and talking to students. It can be that, but it also can be online discussion forums. It can be talking to them on the phone. It can be emailing them. There's a variety of ways as long as it's about course content. What you need to be thinking about if you're going to build a CBE program is how you're going to track that. Increasingly, institutions are being called upon to track that faculty and student interaction. But this is, make no mistake about it, this is one of the most controversial aspects of competency-based education, I would argue. So I think, we've got time, good. We've got time for questions, and I also have put the URL for the Institute where you can find that policy brief on that definition that we've developed. You can find some resources and contact info, not just for me, but also for Carlos if you would like to contact him to talk a little bit about data. We love to have visitors because we are in a really neat space. Amardeep, wouldn't you say?
Yes, it's beautiful.
I feel very, very blessed that the Institute is housed at the old President's Home on campus. So it's this beautiful historic home built in 1927. And it really, the first floor looks like someone's really cool home. And we have meetings in the parlor there. We've got a full kitchen. Others use that first floor. They even have, I think, weddings between alum there sometimes, and development and advancement events. But we've got the second floor of that building, and we're in the process of getting new furniture and getting that all set up. But I think Amardeep, who was just there yesterday, and Anne can attest to where Anne go. Yeah, can attest to the fact that it's kind of a cool place for us. So I invite you to come visit, take a look at it, come talk to us about your CBE and/or PLA ideas. And also, don't forget, if you want to join that Texas CBE work group, and we often talk about PLA too, they often go hand in hand, please let me know if you'd like to join that group. Questions? And if I can't answer them, I'm probably going to bow to others in the room who have more expertise than I do, I would argue. Yes?
So do you see a continuum between the prior learning assessment and certifications as a role for the colleges and universities that right now has kind of been done by the professional association?
I do, actually. I do, but I tell you what, my expertise is not in certifications and certificates. It's not. So I probably can't answer that question very well. Are there others who have thoughts on this continuum, what kind of needs we have in terms of how these are relating to each other? Can we take it back?
I want to try to mic you just because people may not be able to hear each other. So I know people get shy about talking. No, I'm not. If there's a mic in the
Kevin,
room,
I'll leave that with you since you'll be next.
The credentials are just such a wonderful way to have an external agency validate that this prior learning assessment is the real thing. So I work at a community college and do a lot of this in our EMS program. So National Registry, Texas Department of Health has said, if the student brings in this card, we know the student can do this. So just
wow. Where are you from?
Kilgore College.
Excellent. What was your name?
Julie Fowler.
Thank you, Julie, because I think it looked like maybe people might want to get in touch with you to get more information or share resources about that. So thank you. So I'm sorry I wasn't able to really answer that very well myself, but I'm glad there are others in the room who seem to know about this more.
You mentioned faculty interaction, and we kind of have the same issues in online courses now.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, is there really a significant difference other than that we're basing it on competencies versus?
I think the primary significant difference is the often self-paced nature of competency-based education programs, which makes it more difficult for a faculty member to keep track of where everyone is and what they're doing, I would say. You can't, sometimes it's harder to use cohort learning, but that wouldn't help you with your faculty-student interaction requirements. But that's the biggest challenge probably, is the potential self-paced nature. Other than that, I would argue that it's A lot of the challenges here are similar to online learning in general, and a lot of people are asking, we want data on, how effective and successful these things are. Well, we can really start looking at online learning and all the outcomes that have been coming out about that. I think for models of how to collect our data, for predicting things related to those outcomes based on online education. All of the skepticisms that people have about CBE, I think most of them are retreads from skepticism regarding, not all, but most of them. But it's the self-paced nature, I think, that can make it more difficult to track. Are there other thoughts about that, of what, if you don't know for sure in the trenches, just what you imagine could be challenges with CBE and faculty-student interaction? Amardeep?
So I'm from Austin Community College. My name is Amardeep. We have a really successful CBE program going at ACC in computer science and IT, and I'm going to speak about that this afternoon. I think the biggest difference between the traditional online course, I love using the word traditional,
So funny.
that as well, is that the way we deliver the materials, at least at ACC, is very different from the traditional online. We basically, in one of the courses that I developed we hide everything from the student. Just everything is hidden from the student except the orientation when they come into the course. And different students progress at different levels, so that faculty interaction has to be very dynamic. It's not like it was in the traditional course that every Monday you send an email saying, reminder, this is due this week, because every student is progressing at a different level. So it has to be a very personalized interaction, which requires the faculty to be absolutely steeped in the course, which sadly, the traditional online courses really didn't require that much. So that's my thought on it, and I'll talk more about it in the afternoon.
The big concern about this, though, is how, and a criticism of this emphasis on regular and substantive faculty interaction, is how can you then scale up programs cost effectively? If you're required to have those subject matter experts engaging regularly with the student, how do you ensure the personalized learning that you want to have? But again, you could query that about traditional non-online or even online where you've got 300, 400 students. How much interaction is happening in that respect?
So I have a question related to that.
Yeah, Christine.
Can you talk a little bit about how you assign faculty load in competency-based education?
I might need to turn to Mary Hendricks because I think she might have more knowledge. She has a broader base of knowledge about our actual program than I do.
Oh, thank you, Judith.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. We're so glad to have you here. I'll share with you where it was in the beginning and where we're evolving, because I think it's very different. When you start a CBE program, now let's think about it, $750 each 7-week term, they can accelerate. So in our traditional faculty model, we pay adjuncts, or we pay faculty, or we have workloads. Let's say it's a regular faculty member, 4 courses a semester, or an adjunct we pay by course. Well, what happens when you start, you may begin the first 7-week term with 4 students in the beginning, let's say in a course. Then they start accelerating. So you may end up at the end of the 7-week term with 20. And so to pay by course doesn't work. So what we did initially was to pay at the end of the 7-week term $250 per student to the faculty. Not that they completed, we didn't pay them for completing the course. That student was enrolled in that course at the end of the 7-week term. So that their workload, they were compensated for working with that student. We continued that, and I think, Judy, you shared with them how many students we had the first 7-week term. As we have more students, then we set a threshold, $250 per student until you reach our minimum adjunct rate, which is $2,500, and then we cap the courses at 30, which is really less than what others are doing right now, but we wanted to get faculty involved in that. Now, what we're finding as far as workload costs it's actually coming out less than what we were paying in our traditional models, which I think is interesting. But as we scale up, there's going to be a need to hire additional full-time faculty for the
Yeah.
program. But right now, we're using existing faculty and then adjunct faculty.
You know, let me add something regarding faculty. This is really a kudos to Mary and her leadership, I would say. Well, let me just talk about Texas A&M University Commerce in this regard. Faculty were involved in the development of those competencies of this program pretty much from the get-go, as well as at STC. Faculty came together once a month to develop the competencies. They also worked with industry. It's really crucial to get faculty support for the program. But what I really wanted to mention was there also was not just support, but full-on engagement from upper-level administration that went to the point of the president and Mary herself, the vice president for Student Access and Success, teaching in this program. And Mary, you continue to teach in the program, don't you?
I will share.
Our provost as well.
My discipline is psychology, and I've taught regular online classes, face-to-face classes, but I wanted the experience of teaching in a competency-based program just to get a feel for what's different. Here's what I found. The workload is very different in a competency-based program. I had a deeper relationship with students because I'm really focused on their individual progress rather than the class progress. Even though in an online class you're wanting to ensure every student's successful, but what it allowed me to do as a faculty member is hone in on those areas that a student was having difficulty and really coach that student and find other resources that may not be in the course itself to help them gain knowledge and skills and provide evidence of that in the competency-based program. I do want to add one thing about regular and substantive interaction with faculty. You know, that's been there forever for online education, but I think the scrutiny of innovation has brought it to the microscope from the federal government. I will share with you, we had a program review audit in February from the Department of Ed. It's the first one we've had in 20 years. And what we did to provide evidence is faculty training. The auditors never asked to see any courses. Now, we all know when auditors come, you would have a different group that would want to see courses and then pass judgment. But those that we had wanted to see evidence of what training we provided to faculty. So I just want to share that seems to be the direction they're going. We're faculty trained with what is regular and substantive interaction for these programs.
So can you tell us what training you provided and how you track that interaction?
Yes. We do faculty training at the beginning of every 7-week term, even if you've been teaching in the program forever. And the main reason is to because it's new, we want the faculty to have input of issues, what's going on. So we do a PowerPoint and we define what regular and substantive interaction is and what it's not, because I think it's important for faculty to get a mental model of what we're expecting. And it's not that it's student emails you and says they need help. That's not regular and substantive interaction. Regular and substantive interaction is the faculty member going in and looking at how the student has performed on the assessments and then guiding, the faculty member says, for example, in my discipline, they may, in psychology, need to develop a plan for a client, for example, and didn't fulfill that requirement. So I dig down into where did that student get off track and not have the knowledge. And so I explain what he or she did well and then what he or she needs to do to gain competency in that particular learning outcome.
By the way, I think MRD knows that Wendy Prater at Lone Star College, as a part of that Perkins Leadership Grant, is developing faculty professional development tools for CBE.
About that in
Excellent.
my presentation.
Excellent.
And as far as tracking, Christine, the tracking is in the LMS, and so if we needed to provide evidence of the interaction, it would just be pulling that. in providing that. They never asked for it. And if you think about where regular and substantive interaction comes into play and how auditors view it, it's under consumer information that you must provide. And so what they're looking for is check, did the institution focus on this? And then if they wanted to dig deeper, then we could go in the LMS and pull it. But think about this, auditors do not have the instructional knowledge to really define what is regular and substantive. And traditionally, from a legal standpoint, they've stayed away from judging is this quality instruction because they're not capable of doing so. So really what they're doing is checking off, is it there, is it not there?
That's reassuring to me. Thank you for filling in there, Mary, filling in some holes for me.
And maybe you'll share that PowerPoint presentation that you used to train your faculty? If so, we'll put it up so that everybody can at least see it as a framework that they could use.
I just think, you know, in closing, options. It's about options for students, isn't it? The marriage of PLA and CBE really provides students with more options than they've had before, and that's what we want to do to help them succeed. Quality, high quality options, right?